Hi guys, welcome back to Steep Riders. Today we have a Yamaha XVS1300 Midnight Star. It's a 2008 model, and we're back with James from Tizwaz in Bournemouth, and he's going to tell you some more about it.
Cool, right, so I'm James from Tizwaz again with my other bike. This is my Midnight Star 1300, and owning one of these has been a dream for a very long time for me. This was when they first came out in 2007. I set this as my desktop wallpaper when I was at college. And then this year I finally managed to buy one. I got this one for 4,695, which is quite low. Most used examples go from between sort of 5 to 6 grand, and I've seen a few more in really good condition that are a little bit more expensive than that. So this bike's powered by a 1304cc V-twin motor, putting out a reasonably healthy 70 horsepower and 81 pound-feet of torque, which feels like enough. It's quite a heavy bike at 303 kilos dripping wet, but it's got it feels like it's got enough there to kind of work with. They did make a bigger one. They made a 1900, which I did consider. Obviously, being a bigger guy, you know, a physically bigger bike could fit me a bit better. But I don't like how it looks as much, and a bike like this, really you buy it to look at as much as to ride. And the 1900, it's a little bit kind of too Art Deco, it's a bit too chromy, whereas this, it's still got quite minimalist clean lines that I really like. Now the story behind this bike, I actually bought this one about a week before lockdown 1 happened, and the previous owner had installed a very cheap alarm immobilizer on it. Now the problem with alarm immobilizers is if the alarm goes, then the bike's immobilized, and I'd ridden it 3 times. Last time I rode it, it got a bit wet in the rain, and that was enough for the alarm to go fizzle and pop, and then the bike actually died outside my mate's house. I then phoned up my usual mechanics. It's a bit above my pay grade, stripping things out from the ECU, and he said, yeah, I can't do it, mate, because I'm shielding. And then lockdown happened, and this bike sat outside my mate's for 3 months before I could actually get to it, which was heartbreaking. If it was at mine, at least I could clean it and look at it, but no, it was just stuck outside my mate's for 3 months, so that was pretty tragic. But yeah, it's all working now. Got it all fixed, and I'm really happy with it. Luggage at the moment, I haven't got any. I got some cheap eBay throw over sort of fake leather panniers, but I really don't like how they look. I am going to get some proper Saddleman saddlebags for it. The ones I'm after are 350 odd quid, including the mounts. But what it does, it gives you a nice sort of fake leather covered, hard locking, waterproof saddlebag, and it actually matches the shape of this rear fender, and it gives you kind of a boat tail finish at the back, and it looks really smart. It really sets the bike off nicely, and has got absolute tons of luggage capacity. Now this one's fairly standard as it sits. I've put a little sissy bar on. I know that looks really short, but that's all a passenger needs. I think it's as much about psychological confidence, knowing you've got something behind your butt to stop you from slipping off. So I put that on. It already had the Highway Hawk saddlebag mounts, which, like I said, they're going to go when I get the Saddleman ones. The previous owner put Highway Hawk floorboards on. He was really raiding the Highway Hawk catalogue parts with this bike. Problem is with these, as standard, it used to have foot pegs, like normal standard rubber foot pegs. And what I don't like about these Highway Hawk ones is they're chrome. Now this is where your passenger's going to put their feet. So muddy boots on chrome, you can see it's all furring up on the top edge already, which isn't great. The Yamaha one's aluminium and embossed rubber, so you know, a lot more sturdy. The other thing that's not standard, you probably already noticed, is exhaust, Cobra exhaust. Really loud, really throaty, great addition to the bike, really glad they did that. Final thing that he put on is these fender tips, which I do quite like. I think they set the bike off quite nicely and give you a bit of protection from, you know, the most obvious places you're going to stone chip. Although he's glued them in quite badly, so at some point I'm probably going to pry them off, clean it all up and put some other ones on. Now what I've changed on this bike, I've still got the stock handlebars, but they were quite low. They're quite sort of swept back handlebars. So all I've done, loosened the nuts off, pushed them upright, just so that way, being a taller rider, I found that in the standard sort of low position it was kind of knocking my knees. So this way it just gives me a little bit more clearance and leg room. Dash, fairly sparse as you'd expect on a cruiser. They tend not to put too much on there, so I've got all your normal warning lights and a speedo, and that's pretty much it. No fuel gauge, again I'm doing that on a trip counter. But yeah, you don't need that much on a cruiser. You know, you're not doing track days on it, you're not looking for where your red line is, you're just changing gear as and when you feel like. You've got a 5-speed box on this bike, but where it's got so much torque you barely need to touch that heel toe shifter. You can just kind of leave it in whatever your gear you're riding in and go from there. What I really like is the view that you get from the rider's saddle. It's all a very clean kind of dash, you know, there's not too much cluttering going on up here, and it gives you a really nice kind of, for the handlebars, the chrome handlebars and the headlight sort of frames the road ahead quite nicely, I think. Ergonomically, I quite like the riding position. It's still fairly well balanced. It's about 48% of the weight is on the front, so that's not too bad for a cruiser. And also your feet aren't stretched out too far in front of you, so I don't get too much lumbar pain and stuff when I'm riding it. Fairly fuel efficient, 'cause it's quite a low revving engine. Whatever study you look at on the internet will give you a different figure. 50-ish miles to the gallon seems to be about average from what people are saying. 19.5 litre fuel tank, so you've got plenty of petrol in there. It's meant to have a range of about 185 miles, but I tend not to trust these things. I tend to get a bit nervy and start looking around for a petrol station at about 120, because obviously not having a fuel gauge, you know, you don't really know when that fuel light's going to come on, and then you don't really know how much you've got till you're on empty. So sort of 100-120-ish miles I top it up. So 0 to 60 is about 5.5 seconds, and top speed is about 120-ish mile an hour. But you know, it's a cruiser, it's not really about that. It's more about you've watched one too many episodes of Sons of Anarchy and you bought this bike to pose and look cool, which is exactly what I'm doing with it. Mine might be a little bit quicker to 60 because, you know, I've got the standard, I haven't got a standard can on there, I've got the Cobra can, and that just helps it breathe a little bit better. So it should be a little bit under average to 60. Brakes, they're really good for a cruiser actually. A lot of the time on cruisers, because the weight's all so far back, you find yourself having to favour the rear brake quite a lot, but this one, 'cause it's quite well balanced, still got 48% of the bike's mass over the front wheel. You've got nice big twin front discs on the front, so I find you can actually use the front brake as a front brake to actually brake with, whereas some other brands of cruiser, because they're so badly balanced, they just stick a single front rotor on there and then you're using the rear brake constantly. So really like how the braking's set up on this bike. Your suspension's fairly standard stuff. You've got an adjustable rear, which I haven't had to play with yet. It seems to be in the right place for me and my passenger. Lights, standard bulbs, although I find that the headlight on this is an absolute dark buster, I'd call it. You know, it's like a freight train sized headlight, so at night it does tend to light up in front of you quite well. Common problems at about 40,000 miles, the injectors tend to need to be recalibrated. I know this because a mate of mine has got one and done ridiculous mileage on it, and every 40,000 miles he does the injectors. You've got your standard sort of cruiser issues, you know, chrome deteriorating, rust, stone chips on the metallic paint, all your standard sort of cruiser problems. You've got a really low seat on this bike. It's 670mm saddle, which is kind of the lowest seat of any bike I ride on the regular. Comfort wise, it's quite comfortable for a rider, but cruisers are never going to be, I'm probably going to offend a few people here, but cruisers are never going to be that comfortable when you do long distances, because when you're on a cruiser your feet are out in front of you, that puts the weight on your bum, your lower back. So, you know, if you had to do sort of 1,000 miles in a day, leave this at home and get your BMW GS out. That'll be a lot better over long distance. But, you know, for a bit of light touring, day touring, all that sort of things, I haven't really had any issues. I've probably done about 300 miles in a day on this at a push, and I've been all right at the end of it. Passenger comfort, you've actually got a nice passenger seat on this bike, which for a modern bike, that's a really nice addition, to actually have somewhere comfortable for your passengers to sit. I did put the backrest on just so that way my passengers got a little bit more support. They feel less like they're going to fall off the end. Ergonomically, you've got quite a good sort of passenger seat to passenger peg or board ratio in this case. It means that your passenger doesn't have his or her knees up around their ears, so comfort wise I'd say it's pretty decent for a passenger. So overall I would definitely recommend this bike as a budget cruiser. If I had the money I'd be going Indian, it's that simple. I think Indian make the best cruisers in the world. I don't have that sort of money because I'd need one of the big ones. So this is sort of my compromise. Like I said, this was 4695, so that's not masses for, you know, big kind of cruiser money. And considering how comfortable and fun it is to ride, it's definitely a worthwhile purchase if you want a big cruiser on the cheap. A few other things I'd like to mention, because I actually used to own the previous model to this, the Dragstar 1100. And they stopped making the Dragstar because it couldn't keep up with current environmental regulations. As it happens, they don't sell these in the UK anymore. They updated them in 2014, I think, and they're still selling them in America, but they can't sell them over here because we've got stricter environmental controls. Anyway, the old Dragstar 1100, brilliant bike. I owned that for a couple of years and I did thousands upon thousands of miles on it. Problem is with the Dragstar 1100, if you've got one, you know, no offense, it's not a bad bike, I really loved mine, but the engine's a lot more old-fashioned. It came out of the Virago 1100, the old XV1300s. So the engine is bulletproof, you know, it's going to outlive all of us. However, it's a very long stroke engine. It's still air cooled, you know, it's an old-fashioned engine, whereas this one is a lot more modern. They've definitely brought the engine up to date with things like fuel injection. They got rid of the carburetors, and by making the stroke shorter, it feels more like a modern sort of sporty engine compared to the Dragstar 1100. Aesthetically, they've modernised it a lot from the Dragstar 1100 as well. They did a few different sort of flavours to the 1100, but mine had you know, lovely chrome spoked wheels, easy on the eye, pain in the arse to clean. And the other thing with the difference between the Dragstar and the Midnight Star, on the Dragstar all of this was all chromed. Okay, looks kind of nice, but again, it's very, very chromy, that bike, and it involves a lot more cleaning. What I really like about this one, they've matched off the matte black engine casings with some chrome finishes, and I really think not only does that help make the chrome pop and make it look a lot more modern, there's also actually a lot less to clean.